Hello. I'm going to talk about Rococo and Neoclassicism in chapter 26 today. We're going to look at the 18th century in Europe, and we'll finally get to America. So this is a century of revolutions. Last chapter in the Baroque period, we had Louis XIV, who was still the ruler of France, and he called himself the Sun King with his hall of mirrors, if you recall. And this palace, Versailles, inspires many grandiose homes in the continent. By 1800, however, revolutions will overthrow the monarchy in France, and there will be independence in the British colonies and in America. There'll be another revolution. Well, there'll be several, actually. There'll be a scientific revolution. There'll also be a democratic revolution, and there'll be the industrial revolution. And these all will change the economic landscape of Europe and North America. And all of these social, political, economic, and technological changes will also transform art. So at the end of the Baroque is this style called Rococo. It's a very funny sounding style, I know. The Sun King dies in 1715, Louis XIV, and the elite move from this palace, Versailles, to the pleasures of town life. And at this point, the economic landscape sort of transfers to a resurgence in aristocratic and noble power rather than the monarchy. And these wealthy people will be the patrons of art. Paris is going to be a new place for people to meet in salons. We're going to have the strong women figures sort of running these salons. And they will vie to have famous people like Madame de Pompadour and Catherine the Great come to the salon, where they would talk about books and art. Artists would be invited to these as well. And there is going to be an art associated with these. It's associated with the Regency, the in-between king, and then when Louis V finally takes over. And this style, Rococo, starts with interior design. This is the Salon de la Princesse. So this is one of these salons where wealthy people would meet and talk about lofty things, mostly gossip. And these would be the centers of Parisian social and intellectual life. And you can see this very highly ornate, very Louis XIV inspired, ornate design with all of this movement and floral, decorative surface things going on. And again, this starts as interior, but will soon become a painting style as well. So Antoine Watteau is a Rococo painter, and this is his pilgrimage to Cythera. So Cythera is Athena's birthplace. It's an island. So we're talking about a classical place. And this painting shows the stages of courtship. Watteau painted two different versions of this, and they are filled with sort of this longing or nostalgia, but it's supposed to be lighthearted and elegant, and it's wealthy people out doing leisurely things, enjoying themselves, as rich people do. And you can see Watteau's style is maybe reminiscent of Da Vinci, perhaps, with this sfumato. We have all this atmospheric perspective. We have, these feathery brush strokes, which is kind of a telltale sign of the Rococo. Remember, the interior that we just looked at had highly decorative surface. So this is what it will have in common with painting. And you see these figures sort of, this is like a very elaborate gold-looking boat here. Nobody knows if they're coming or going to the island, right? They seem to be going to this boat, but are they on the island going home, or are they somewhere else going to the island? That's not clear. He left it sort of ambiguous. Watteau himself called this type of painting a fête galante. A fête is a party in French, and gallant is an outing. So this would be the outdoor entertainment or amusements of the French high society. So the inheritors of Louis XIV in the Baroque transferred into this Fête Gallant Rococo painting. And these are details from the painting. This is a statue of Athena, and she is, the moss growing over her, looking down on the scene. And we see, courtships happening. We also see little Cupid over here sitting on his arrows. He doesn't need to shoot arrows into anybody. Everybody seems to be falling in love on their own, so he can rest up. And here we see the stages of courtship. He's helping her up, he's walking her, and he's getting her onto the boat to the island of love. And this is the second version he has here. We have much more elaborate ship. Same sort of format, if you can see. He has like he brackets it in or frames it with his trees, and you can see all the surface texture, the elegance. And alea rutine means going or coming. It's not known what he meant. So this is Watteau's L'Indifferent. He liked to sketch figures in action. So he has that in common with Baroque. But he has a very elegant, slow movement to his figures. He liked to sketch these troopers or troubadours as models, and you can see his surface texture. So we have this sort of graceful elegance, surface texture. It's supposed to be lighthearted and whimsical. This would be for, leisure or pleasure. And one of the last things Watteau painted before he died of tuberculosis was this a signboard for his friend's art shop, an art dealer, Gersant. And you can see all the paintings all stacked up in their salon style. Remember, if you hang it like a salon, the top ones are the important ones. And we see, a portrait of Louis XIV being packed away here. So out with the old regime. It's time for, it's Louis V now, and it's Rococo, not Baroque. And you see all of these scenes of, there's nude women, and there's a nude woman with angels, another nude, another nude. So this is like classical things, but a little bit maybe, scandalous in a way, but none of the people are even paying attention to all of these things. It's said that the shop of Gersant was very small, and that, of course, Watteau takes his liberties with, making a gigantic room with, more interior spaces here. This is Boucher. It's Cupid a Captive, and this is, this is sort of the worst part of Rococo. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of this, but he's often used because he's over the top. This is more than just like leisurely people having, a pleasant day. This is just outright, sort of classical quotations, but in a sort of a naughty way, right? You got all these ladies around, there's muses around Cupid, surrounded by himself. And this is mostly made for, wealthy rich men who probably put like a curtain over this to draw it so that, women wouldn't look at it. And when they had company, male company, they could, unveil it, and everybody would get a good laugh at it. So it's supposed to be a little scandalous, a little bit naughty. And Boucher certainly is that. But the quintessential, other than the Watteau, this kind of summarizes more what Rococo is. This is The Swing by Fragonard. And you can see there's a woman swinging. And as the story goes, she has duped whoever this guy is supposed to be. Some people say bishop or husband, has him escorting her out to swing. And you can see these diagonals here. He's pulling the swing here, and you can see the diagonal here. The light is hitting her, and you can see that she's looking down at a man who's hiding in the bushes, and she is kicking up her shoe so that he could, have a better view. Yes, upper skirt. This is what Rococo is. It's a little bit naughty. It's, rich people doing naughty things. She's having an affair. And of course, the line of sight, he's hidden by the bushes, so he can't see him. They're making a buffoon out of him. And then all the angels, like these two hugging, like these two want to, and this little angel saying, shh, don't tell anybody. And again, with the surface detail, the little feathery brushstrokes, the softness of the air, everything is just so sumptuous and kind of pleasant. This is probably like a rich person's life. So we see Baroque inspiration here with the movement, the diagonal, and the lighting, but really this does, if you want to like compare this to say a Caravaggio, like what more can you say? Those are the only things it could possibly have in common. I'm going to skip that one. All right, so there is going to be peace and end the 30 Years' War. And there's going to be a time of um, enlightenment and scientific discovery. We have Newton, who is going to discover gravity. We've been using it for long enough. Now he's going to actually write about what it is. Um, the Copernicus had already solved the theories of you know um, the universe. So we're going to like see this further enhanced with lots of things that are going to be discovered, and lots of things are going to be invented. And we'll see that again in the next chapter as well. So the Enlightenment sort of starts with Rene Descartes, who declares, I think, therefore I am. This is also called the Age of Reason. And that means, I am what I think in a way. So it's a little bit like the Renaissance was the age of the individual, the thinking person making a decision, acting and reacting. Remember that humanism. But this is based more on reason, rationale, scientific kind of approach to things. So this is going to happen in England, France, and America. We're going to have the scientific revolution, democratic revolutions, and at the same time, for whatever reason, this has always kind of amazed me, people are going to start looking back as well. And there are reasons why this happens, but instead of looking future, towards the future with all of this science and revolution, we're going to see some artists looking back to classical things. So we have two people who were sort of part of the Enlightenment, other than Descartes, who's a mathematician and a philosopher. We have Newton, and we have Locke. Newton comes up with scientific, like what we think about as science in a way, scientific studies, that you need solid proof of your theories, and don't and avoid supernatural realms. So everything should be based on the natural physical world, tangible, concrete experience. So nothing beyond that. So what you can see with your eyes, what you can prove to be real, is how you should live your life. Locke has more like a politician. Humans are born good, not cursed by original sin. The laws of nature grant them natural rights of life, liberty, property. Yes, that does sound familiar in this country. And it is the government's purpose to protect these things. So this is Enlightenment thinking. This is at the time when, this country is going to adopt some of these things. But it's amazing to think like this is happening not that long after Baroque, which is a counter Reformation style to begin with, trying to get people back to the church, get them excited about Catholicism. Um, you know, this flies in the face of that, and of course, this is based on all the scientific, inventions and things happening. So we're going to have a democratic revolutions. We're going to have, you don't need to write this down. We're going to have the American and the French Revolution happen. There we are. We're going to have Piranesi is going to go to Rome and all over Italy and Greece, and he's going to make these books which are going to be circulated. That's going to influence people or artists. We have museums being a thing that wasn't really a thing. People had collections like wealthy people, but there's going to be, places for people, regular people, to go and see works of art. There's going to be places that we're going to have, that artists can go and study art. Uh, and this is a good thing for education, but as far as collecting things, it may have been a terrible decision to start museums. Um, if you took 114, if you do, you'll remember Lord Elgin, who goes to the Parthenon and convinces the Turks who are in charge of the Parthenon when he gets there to let him work on, study, and then eventually take a lot of the marbles, they're called, the sculptures of the Parthenon, including most of the pediment sculptures and a lot of the frieze from the inside of it. And he does this around this time. And of course, the British Museum, this Parthenon looking museum, um, houses this. So, you know, this is a great thing now. We could all go see things at museums and study them and, you know, things from all over the world. But how these things get to museums is not very above board to begin with. There's all kinds of laws and things now, but it wasn't really a thing then. We're going to have the scientific revolution. Copernicus had already sort of, advanced theories or proven that everything does not revolve around the Earth. And this will be advanced with Newton, who will, figure everything else out with gravity. So all of these things, I just said that about uh, Newton and Locke. How will religion be affected by this if you need concrete proof of something in a scientific approach? What will happen? And what does happen is people just have to make a personal choice, and it's still kind of a thing. You don't need to know all this. I just like to put this in because it's just amazing how many things were sort of solved or discovered, and then how many things were invented. Little things we don't really think about, right? So we have the scientific method, we have logarithms, we have uh, planetary motion, inertia, gravity, emotion, things to do with the human body, lymphatic system, red blood cells, microorganisms, the speed of light. I mean, this is all kinds of, every day people were getting new news of new things. These are all the things that were invented during the scientific revolution. We have a microscope, thermometer, telescope, calculus. Not a lot of people are excited to have geometry or calculus invented, but this is the time of geometry with the ancient Greeks. And I put wait what because I feel like that's what I would be saying if all this stuff was going on, oh well, this about gravity or this about the planets, kind of changes your whole way of thinking about Earth, not just like your own, town or country, Earth or people, humanity in general. And all of these discoveries will, of course, lead to the Industrial Revolution. And many artists embrace this idea of science. If you can watch this on your own if you want. There's a great um, like a little documentary where they actually do this experiment, not with a bird, but with marshmallows, and it's kind of fun. You might want to do it at home. So this is called an experiment on a bird in the air, and there's a bird in the glass here, and they are taking out and re-putting in oxygen to see how the bird will sort of shrink and expand. It's very cruel. And in the video, they only use marshmallows, and you can see these girls are horrified. And some of the other people, this guy doesn't really want to watch either. But this man is very much into it. If you've seen Back to the Future, he kind of looks like the crazy guy in that. Um, so, sort of embracing this idea of science and new discoveries and experiments. Um, but hopefully, you can see right away, Derby is taking the style of Caravaggio. This looks like a Baroque painting with tenebrism. Right? We have all these diagonals, we have the lighting, we have drama, we have movement. It's all the elements of the Baroque, but it is in a scientific age. And this is Derby's other. He loved the Caravaggio style. And here, an orrery is this metal maquette of the solar system. So he's teaching the youngins all about it. And this is a time, this is an iron bridge of cast iron um, replacing other materials because it's so strong. And eventually we'll have steel being used. And this will sort of change the face of modern architecture. And you can see hopefully that the architects are, still kind of making a quotation of the aqueducts. Um, so he's the first to master the science of smelting, but not just for a bridge. He was known to make a very thin cast iron pots, which are still used now, pots and pans, and it's cheap. So he sold them. Lots of people couldn't afford other things, or copper. So he was very good at selling these to the underclasses. And eventually we'll have, with iron comes cast iron rails, wheels, cylinders, locomotives, right? Because cast iron can take a great deal of heat. That's why they're used in pots. So if you're going to have, all these things that are going to create heat, you'll need iron. But not everybody embraces this new science. Many people are skeptical about, all of this. What does it mean for humanity? So we have this school of naturalists who follow Rousseau, and Rousseau argued that the arts and sciences had corrupted man, and that man is born good and corrupted by society. He is the opposite of Voltaire and the age of the Enlightenment. And one such artist is Chardin, and this is his painting called Grace. Of course, it's called Grace because this woman is instructing her little daughter here on, you can see she's about to, she's putting her hands together on how to pray. And they're going to say grace together. This girl's already clasping her hands. So it's a humble interior genre painting, if you remember that from the Dutch. And in fact, it's very Dutch influenced, right? It's not unlike Vermeer, but Vermeer, had a little bit more affinity for like surface texture. Um, so Chardin is a favorite of the art critic Diderot, and Diderot is a person who will go to the salon and write reviews, which is still a job now. If you like to write and you like looking at art, you could become an art critic. You'd actually have to take a lot of art history classes, but that's okay. It's fun, I hope. And art critics go to shows and then they write reviews on artists or the whole show altogether. Uh, and truthfully, it still is today. If you get a bad review, you could like lose your representation at a gallery. At this time, you could be not juried into the salon in the future. So art critics hold a lot of power. The state is running the salons, but the critics are also sort of cultivating what is taste. And we have Louis XV once owned this painting, which is kind of odd to think he's the guy in charge of Rococo, like the swing, and he would like something sort of the direct opposite of that. And just to show you, this is a Chardin self-portrait. He made many self-portraits. This is his boy blowing a bubble, and he did many, many still lifes. He might be pretty underrated in art history, and he did a lot of genre scenes. So this is naturalism. This is embracing like just everyday things rather than what Derby is doing. This is called The Village Bride by Greuze. And this is a very humble scene of a boy and a girl who are going to get married. And the boy is giving the father his dowry. The dowry is the money you pay um, a gentleman to take the daughter off your hands. Um, and you can see that they are very upset to be letting her go. And the moral of this painting is sort of rich in love, poor in money. These are good, hardworking people who have a lot of love for each other, even if they don't have much money to show for it. So you might even think of this as a parallel to, um, nature over science, um, religion over science. And this one, I'm always kind of miffed that he's in art history books. This is William Hogarth's breakfast scene from Marriage a la Mode. Marriage a la Mode was a series of 6 engravings that Hogarth did and were widely circulated. Um, People absolutely loved these because they were like a soap opera. I'll just go to the series of 6 here. And this is based on satirical writing. So it's like visual satire. If you think like Saturday Night Live, that's satire. Um, so here, this is the beginning one. This isn't in your book, but this guy's holding his family lineage, and this guy has all the money, and the two of them are marrying off their children. The girl's father has a name, and the boy's father has money. So name or money, they put them together and you got a winning combination, except for the fact that these two don't seem very interested in each other. And then these two little dogs who are chained together are not paying attention to each other. They are, of course, symbolic of what these two are doing. Um, and then we have the architect looking out the window at the classical building here. They're making some kind of business scheme as well. So it's a marriage of convenience and opportunity. And of course, we can't, look away from this guy chatting up the little misses. And this is the second one in the series. This is the one that's in your book, The Breakfast Scene, where this woman has been out with the guy who was whispering to her. His name is, he's a lawyer. He's Silver Tongue, not very subtle. This guy is bringing all these bills in, and he can't believe how in disarray everything is. And then the husband has been out all night, and the dog is sniffing something in his pocket. You can read about that in your textbook. So it's pure satire, right? Like the chair is overturned, and they're just yawning and stretching, and this guy's overreacting. It's like a soap opera. It's like comedy all in one, and people absolutely went nuts for these. Of course, they don't have TV or movies, so and they can openly gossip about these characters because they are just characters. Unfortunately, the end result is the husband finds out about the affair. He kills the lawyer Silver Tongue, and the mother kills herself. Well, she's the daughter, but the wife kills herself. And there is her little baby saying goodbye. Well, that's Hogarth went too far with that one, maybe the baby. Um, Vigée Lebrun is a female painter, and she is often lumped with the next female artist because they worked at the same time and they were put in the academy the same very same day. Um, she's kind of put in with the naturalists because she doesn't seem to embrace science because what she's concerned with is the monarchy, and this is Marie Antoinette. She painted her many times. She was her painter. But you can see her here, um, you know, at her easel, like we've seen plenty of others. And she's using the sort of the feathery brushstrokes of Rococo. And this is Self-Portrait with Two Pupils. This is La Bilgiade. She is also at her easel, but she's known for getting female students. Remember, it's hard to become a female artist unless you have a mentor, somebody to work with and teach you. So she would recruit females and try to get them into the academy. So we might think of her as a feminist artist as well. This is a sculpture of her father in the background, a portrait bust. Um, and she did the opposite. Vichy Lebrun, of course, she's working for the monarchy. She flees France when the revolution happens, but La Bilgerade stays um, because she is in line with the revolutionaries. As a matter of fact, she has painted Robespierre. Over here is this portrait that she painted. Both females were allowed into the French Royal Academy on the same day. However, after the revolution, the Academy rescinds their membership, and women were no longer allowed into the Academy for now. Another artist we look at is Gainsborough, who is very kind of Rococo in his style. It's very reminiscent of Watteau. We just looked at Return to Cythera. And he made many, many, many paintings all around England. So he traveled from France over to England because they're kind of in line with, very similar to Vigée Lebrun, especially this portrait here. We have Joshua Reynolds. Reynolds and Gainsborough are sort of in competition with each other in England, a friendly competition in a way. This is Lord Heathfield, and this is called Grand Manner Portrait. And we see influence of the Baroque, obviously, with the diagonal, the movement, everything's moving around him. And this is the general, on the battlefield, um, the cannon is upside down. He's just defeated his enemy. He's taking a moment to look off into the light wistfully. He holds the key, um, the key to the town that he's just defeated. And hopefully you can see that this has a lot in common with, excuse me, sorry, with colonial portraits like George Washington. And in fact, most American artists will go over to England and study, and this will be the art of America too. So we have courageous patriotism, and that sounds like it belongs in our country. And again, these two were uh, frenemies, if you want to call them that. They had a friendly rivalry, but they often painted the same thing, kind of mocking each other. So this woman here is Sarah Siddons. She's a famous actress at the time. They each painted her a few times. Gainsborough, this is his famous Blue Boy. And Reynolds painted the Red Boy just to kind of chide him a little bit. So they're doing that up in England. Also in England, we have Benjamin West, an American artist who goes to England. He does paint some American subjects. This is actually a Canadian subject. And he becomes pretty successful at giant history paintings. Remember, history paintings are number one in the salon system. So if you wanted to get yourself a name real fast and get in the salon in a good place, you would, try to make a gigantic history painting. So American expat, he moves to England and works there the rest of his life. He helps to found the Royal Academy of the Arts in London. And in this scene, he's showing an English commander in Battle of Quebec, which gives Canada to Great Britain. And if you know about Canada, Quebec still speaks French. Um, and here you see him sort of, dying after the battle here. They're trying to revive him, and he's, very much like a martyr, like he's Christ or, the dying Gaul or some Greek figure. Except they're all in contemporary clothing. And this would have given people this little American twist here that Benjamin West brings, and that is a glimpse at a Native American. And this was a very successful painting. Another American we look at in this chapter, and again, we're in England in the late 1700s, because Copley also went to England to live and work there. He did paint in Boston before he left, but when he left with his family, he did not come back. He was an expat. So we do claim those two as American artists, but really they didn't really work in this country much. But he did do some very distinctly American portraits. Of course, this is Paul Revere. Paul Revere was a blacksmith, and here he is with his pewter here. Um, and he shows this down to earth character, very different than the grand manner. This is American, right? It can't be this grand manner. It will be when it comes to George Washington, though. So neoclassicism happens at this time, and there's a few reasons. Neo means new, and classicism refers to Greco-Roman. Um, the Grand Tour becomes a thing for young men to go and study. They go abroad, it's called, and they would go across the channel if they're English, or across the ocean if they're American, and they would study all things classical. So this would be a proper education. So we're going to see this resurgence of all things classical, but it's very small, and it happens at the same time of other things. It's very small except for architecture, really. At this time, a man named Gibbon writes the book Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, which was widely circulated so many people could get more history on the Romans. An art historian, Winckelmann, who was considered to be the first modern artist, starts to focus on writing about the classical world, and these things get published. And Pompeii and Herculaneum begin to be excavated. So people, on the Grand Tour would go and see these places. Of course, it takes a long time. It's still being excavated, actually. Um, so all these things are sort of happening at once, and artists are going to react to them again. Now, we saw the revival of classicism, of course, in the Renaissance, and here it is again. But neoclassicism, when people are traveling on the Grand Tour, they're going through Italy, and they're looking at actual Roman and Greek stuff, or Roman copies of Greek stuff as well. And they're seeing Renaissance things that have Greek inspired things in them as well, Greek and Roman inspired things. So it's sort of a mishmash of all of those things, right? Because this has perspective in it. Well, that's not an ancient thing, that's a Renaissance thing. So uh, this is the story of Cornelia, who it's not now, you probably don't need me to explain this. She's presenting her children as her treasures when her friend is holding up her own treasures as if, look at showing off her stuff. Cornelia says, I don't need jewels. I have my children. Um, and then Kaufman shows the little girl might be a little bit more interested in having jewelry at that point. And we see in the columns, the dress, everything's very classical looking. As a matter of fact, Cornelia is a classical story. So neoclassicism is sometimes linked with the French Revolution, so will be Romanticism. All of these sort of happen around the same time. So these Enlightenment ideas seem to be behind the revolts. Um, you know, man is free, um, but it's also at the same time that there's an economic crisis in France. The poor get poorer, the rich get richer, and there seems to be a clash between the classes. They called them estates in Paris. And they were fighting over taxes and representation. And this results in a succession of republics and empires until France will find a way to deal with this. And there'll be many revolutions. There's going to be another one in 1830. This is an artist, Jacques-Louis David, obviously a French guy. This is his painting, Oath of the Horatii, and this is a neoclassical painting. Here we see the three Horatii brothers swearing allegiance on their swords to their father and their state. And we have their sisters, mothers, and one of their fiancés is over here. And we see all of the Roman arches, the Greek columns, but we do have perspective. We have Roman dress. So it's neoclassical. It's not Renaissance. um, because it's Renaissance inspired and Greek Greco-Roman inspired as well. So the leaders of Rome and Alba decide to resolve their conflict by sending three people each to fight each other. And the end result of this, why the women are crying, is that one of the woman's fiance is going to die in the battle. Um, David had seen this as a play in Paris years earlier, and it seems that he has made this more like a stage where everybody is acting. They seem like he's, yelled cut, and now they're all just frozen, and he's going to make the painting. It still has Baroque and Renaissance elements to it. And the audience would have seen this as a revolutionary statement, a call to arms, literally. Go and fight for yourself. Um, so David and revolutionaries did take that as a call to arms. David also made this painting, Death of Marat. Um, Marat, Jean-Paul Marat, had been assassinated in his bath. He had some kind of skin affliction where he had to lay in a bath so it wouldn't be irritated. And a female actually got into his house using a false entry letter, which he holds in his hand, and she stabbed him. You can see that here. And he died in his tub. And you can see the knife here. Um, so David is painting this. He was good friends with Marat. He was, part of the Jacobins. And he was devastated at his death, but he takes this opportunity to dedicate this painting to him, says to Marat from David. Um, and he uses a very classical pose and lighting, which anybody on the Grand Tour would notice it was almost the same as Michelangelo's Pieta. So again, at this point, Jacques-Louis David is a revolutionary. He's friends with the revolutionaries, and that will change in the future. Also neoclassical is this, you can see, of course, it's called the Pantheon. It's in Paris. And it's a direct quotation to this building, the Roman Pantheon. So this is, not even disguising, its influence. It's actually called the Pantheon. Pantheon has a Greek temple front, and inside it has a dome, but this has arms to it, like transepts almost, instead of just a big rotunda. Another uh, neoclassical building is the Chiswick House. And this is also a quotation of the Pantheon. You can see it looks very similar to it. But this is also a quotation of a Renaissance building, the Villa Rotunda by Palladio that we looked at. Remember, this one had 4 equal porches on each side, and then the dome in the center. So you can see it's nearly the same, except for the grand entrances. And this is important because all of these, Palladio, the Chiswick House, Thomas Jefferson will come to Europe, and and England, and he will see all these things. He does the grand tour, and he decides that this is the style, the neoclassical style, should be the style of his country, which is newly forming, and all the buildings still have to be built, and we're going to see those. And he comes back to the University of Virginia, and he makes buildings that look very similar. This is based very much on the Pantheon or the Chiswick House, right? A Greek temple front with a dome behind it. In America in 1800s, your own Greek influence things, and then everything else in Washington, as you know. And of course, sculpture won't escape neoclassicism. We see George Washington and his contrapposto